Hey everybody, Jason here again with GD&T Basics and the video question line. Today's topic is coaxiality versus concentricity versus position. The question that was submitted is, what's the difference between concentricity and coaxiality? What is the ISO symbol for concentricity? And so it's a good question, especially in the ISO world. This gets to be a very blurry line. So again, this video is going to be completely about the ISO standards, specifically the 1101 standard. And the differences between position, concentricity, and coaxiality. I will warn everybody that in the terms of ASME standards, especially the ASME Y14.5, we are not talking about concentricity in terms of that standard. Concentricity in terms of the ASME standard is vastly different than the interpretation of concentricity or coaxiality in terms of ISO. ASME defined concentricity very differently. And in fact, in the 2018 standard for the ASME Y14.5 standard, they've gotten rid of the concentricity symbol because it was so misused. And the way that it was defined in the ASME standard was so out of line with a functional requirement that it's no longer used. ASME recommends we use position or run out instead of the concentricity symbol, even if you aren't on the 2018 standard. But as far as the ISO standards are concerned, these are very much useful tools. And so we're going to go over the differences here. So out of the gate, the ISO standard treats concentricity as sort of a unique subcategory of position, and they actually are interpreted exactly the same. So the ISO standard encourages the use of the concentricity or coaxiality symbol when controlling the position of a cylindrical feature to a datum axis that's coaxial to the feature you're already controlling. So in other words, if the feature you're controlling is coaxial or concentric to your datum axis, then go ahead and use the concentricity or coaxiality symbol. They are the same symbol. We'll show you how to interpret them separately in a second. But if you're trying to control the position of an axis and that axis of your feature is not necessarily coaxial or concentric to your datum, then go ahead and use the position symbol. So now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about the concentricity and coaxiality symbol as far as ISO is concerned. Again, as we mentioned, the concentricity or coaxiality symbol, the one with the two circles here, is the exact same interpretation as position would be if you used that symbol instead. These two drawings are interpreted the exact same as far as ISO standards are concerned. They recommend doing this, however, because our datum axis is coaxial or concentric to our feature we're controlling. Perfectly legal to use this, just more recommended to do this in the ISO standards. But what is the interpretation? Well, the interpretation is that we get an axis from our datum feature, the datum feature being the small id. So we have a envelope that expands inside this feature. That envelope gives us our datum axis. So we can derive a datum axis from our datum feature, and then we go ahead and center our tolerance zone on that datum axis since they are coaxial or concentric. And that diameter is 10 thousandths listed here in both of them. Again, both of these are interpreted the exact same way. And then what we're controlling is the cross-sectional elements. So we're going to take this cross-section, and this cross-section, and this cross-section. Each one of those cross-sections is going to have a center point. And all of those cross-sections better be inside this tolerance zone that is centered on our axis of our datum. That is truly how coaxiality and position are interpreted. And the way we see it listed here, this is coaxiality. Now, how do we interpret it as concentricity? The only way to interpret this as concentricity is to include ACS, all cross sections. And so when we see the ACS symbol, which I see very rarely, this is truly now concentricity. And the interpretation changes ever so slightly. But it's very important to point this out, and that is because we no longer have a datum axis as much as we have a datum point. And that datum point is at any cross section. So if we take cross section right here along our part, and we see that our datum is right here, we get a center point for that cross section of our datum feature. So now we have a datum point right here, and we go ahead and center our tolerance zone, which is now a circle, not a cylinder, since we're doing cross sections on that datum point. Notice again, on the previous example, we had a datum axis that was represented by a cylinder best fit to our datum feature, whereas here, that might not share the same location. We are only concerned with the datum as it exists here. So if there's any form error, we're ignoring everything else that happens out over here during this one cross-sectional inspection. And it's any cross-section, but separate from the other cross-sections. So we would have a datum point here, a tolerance zone centered on there. We can come in and measure the points here and the points here and get a center point. And as long as the center point of that cross-section for the feature is close to the center point of that cross-section for the datum, we've met concentricity. So again, it's concentricity when we see ACS. It's coaxiality when we do not see this. And when it's coaxiality, we create a datum axis, not a datum point. When it's concentricity like this, we create a datum point for that one given cross-section. And again, we need to check multiple cross-sections, but they are separate from each other. So hopefully that helps clarify the differences between concentricity and coaxiality and position in the ISO symbols. The symbol for coaxiality and concentricity are the same symbol. It's just interpreted different when we see the ACS symbol, and that's technically called concentricity. Thanks for tuning in, and hopefully this helped clear up your question.
Our goal is to be your best source for GD&T information online. It's important to us that everyone involved in engineering and manufacturing have the chance to learn and better understand GD&T on your prints. We have many free resources to help you get started on your learning journey. Subscribe to our GD&T community using the link in the description below or visit our website. Test your knowledge with our GD&T and print reading quizzes. Download helpful charts and access articles written by our training experts.